November 24th, 1963. 50 reporters packed a Dallas basement. Cameras rolling live. A handcuffed Lee Harvey Oswald takes 8 steps, and a man in a fedora fires a bullet into his stomach on national television. Millions watched over Sunday breakfast. These are the most chilling times when people were killed over interviews. August 26, 2015, 6:45 in the morning. A reporter and her cameraman go live from a lakeside shopping plaza in Virginia. Routine interview, routine morning. Within seconds, both would be dead, shot on live television.
I've just watched that bit of the broadcast. It is very harrowing viewing, it has to be said. What was happening, it was a normal breakfast TV program. It was going out at 6:45 local time live.
Allison Parker was just 24 years old. She'd celebrated her birthday a week earlier. Her cameraman, Adam Ward, was 27. They worked for WDBJ7, the CBS affiliate in Roanoke, Virginia. That morning, they were at Bridgewater Plaza near Smith Mountain Lake, interviewing Vicki Gardner from the local Chamber of Commerce about tourism. A feel-good story, the kind of segment that fills time between weather updates and traffic reports.
You see the interviewer, Allison Parker, who just turned 24 years old. She was interviewing a woman about tourism in the area. Suddenly, there are 8 shots.
8 gunshots. That's what viewers at home heard. The camera shook, then dropped to the ground. Screams filled the audio, and for just a fraction of a second, Ward's falling camera captured the image of a man holding a handgun. Back in the studio, anchor Kimberly McBroom sat frozen. She later said she thought it might have been a car backfiring. It wasn't. Parker died at the scene. Ward was hit in the head and torso. He never had a chance either. Gardner was shot in the back. She survived by curling into a fetal position and playing dead. A total of 15 rounds were fired. The station's general manager had to do something no news director should ever have to do: confirm to his own viewers that 2 of their colleagues were gone.
Very, very sad duty to report that we have determined through the help of the police and our own employees that Allison and Adam died this morning.
He spoke about how loved they were, how broken the entire WDBJ7 team was, and then came the question every newsroom was asking: who did this?
Shortly after 6:45, when the shots rang out, we do not know the motive. We do not know who the suspect or who the killer is.
The newsroom itself identified the killer. Staff reviewed the footage from Ward's fallen camera and recognized the gunman. His name was Vester Lee Flanagan II, a former WDBJ reporter who had worked under the on-air name Bryce Williams. He'd been fired from the station in February 2013 for volatile behavior. When security escorted him out that day, he threw a wooden cross at the news director and said,
"You need this."
Adam Ward had actually recorded Flanagan being escorted from the building, and Flanagan never forgot that.
2 broadcast journalists in Virginia were shot dead today while live on TV this morning. A reporter and photographer in the middle of a morning live shot were shot by a man described as a disgruntled employee of the television station.
After being fired, Flanagan filed a racial discrimination complaint against WDBJ with the EEOC, even naming Parker and Ward specifically. The complaint was investigated and dismissed. But the grudge festered. Former colleagues at multiple stations described a pattern: confrontations, threats, lawsuits. He'd been fired from newsrooms in Tallahassee, Savannah, and Greenville before ever arriving in Roanoke. What made this case even more disturbing? Flanagan didn't just commit the murders. He filmed them using a body camera. He recorded himself walking up to the trio mid-interview. He stood behind Ward for nearly 15 seconds, handgun drawn, and nobody noticed. Gardner later said the TV lighting had blinded them to everything beyond the camera's frame. Then, he opened fire. He uploaded that footage to social media hours later while fleeing north on the interstate. He wanted people to watch. He wanted it to go viral. And for a brief, sickening window before the platforms took it down, it did. He also faxed a 23-page manifesto to ABC News that morning, calling it a note for friend and family.
That is a question that we are looking into. Did he know before this morning that they would be located at this remote location doing a broadcast?
In those pages, Flanagan cited the Charleston church shooting 2 months earlier as his tipping point. He expressed admiration for the Columbine shooters and the Virginia Tech gunmen. He called himself a powder keg waiting to go off.
Did he see it air this morning, as many people were watching? We're looking into that matter, trying to discover that.
A manhunt lasted nearly 5 hours. Police tracked his cell phone as he fled north in a rented Chevrolet Sonic. A license plate reader on a Virginia State Trooper's cruiser identified the vehicle on Interstate 66, some 200 miles from the shooting.
Trying to work this story, it was a little shopping center in Moneta, Virginia, where this interview was taking place. As I understand, about 25 miles southeast of Roanoke.
Oh, Roanoke, right? Exactly.
When troopers attempted a traffic stop, Flanagan sped away. His car ran off the road less than 2 miles later. Officers found him inside with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head.
News conference about today's horrible events, the shooting deaths of 2 journalists who were doing a live report at a shopping mall in Moneta.
Inside his rental car, police found extra magazines, ammunition, a suitcase with 3 license plates, several disguises including a wig, and a to-do list. He had planned to run.
I just want to make sure that through this we continue to keep our prayers and thoughts with the family of Alicia Parker and Aaron.
The risk of live television had never felt more real. Anchors and reporters across the country grappled with the fact that 2 of their own had been killed doing something as simple as a morning interview. Gardner went on to write a book about her recovery called The Consequences of Survival. Years later, she reflected on what got her through it all.
Gardner hopes her book will help others who go through difficulties.
My whole point is that there's a lot of people that have something horrible happen to them, maybe a car accident, that they can't reverse it.
For Allison Parker's father, Andy, the years haven't softened anything. He became a fierce advocate against gun violence, compared his mission to John Walsh's crusade. After losing his son, he fought tech companies to take down the shooting foe. He testified before Congress. But when it comes to losing his daughter, that wound never closes.
Andy Parker has been navigating the waves of grief over the last decade after the loss of his beautiful daughter, Allison.
You know, it never gets any easier, really. She was my light.
Allison Parker was at the very beginning of her career. She'd interned at WDBJ, worked her way up at a station in North Carolina, and came back to Roanoke to be a correspondent on the morning show. Adam Ward was a Virginia Tech graduate who'd been at the station since 2011. He was engaged to the morning show's producer, the woman who was in the control room the moment the shots rang out. It was supposed to be his last day on that shift.
Parker says he will never fully heal from the loss of Allison, but the impact she had on him and so many others will never fade.
Allison Parker and Adam Ward went to work that morning to tell someone else's story. They never got to finish it. They weren't in a war zone. They weren't chasing a dangerous story. They were standing on a deck at a lake resort, talking about tourism on a Wednesday morning, and in the blink of an eye, they were gone. Saturday morning, October 11th, 2014, a radio host sits behind the mic in Mazatlan, Mexico. 2 men walk in. Seconds later, listeners across Sinaloa hear a gunshot, live on the air.
The attack took place at a radio station in Mazatlan at around 10:40 a.m. on Saturday as community activist Atilano Roman was on air.
Atilano Roman Terrado wasn't just a radio host. He was the voice of over 800 families who'd been pushed off their land. Families whose farms were swallowed whole when the Mexican government built the Picachos Dam back in 2007. Their villages flooded, their homes replaced with tiny shack-like government housing that barely qualified as shelter. And Atilano, he refused to stay quiet about it. He led a movement called the Displaced Persons of Picachos. For years, they organized marches, staged blockades, demanded the compensation they were promised. And when those protests weren't enough, Atilano took the fight to the airwaves with a weekly radio program called Así es mi tierra. That's how my land is. Every week on FM 98.7 Fiesta Mexicana, he'd call out the Sinaloa authorities for breaking their promises. The movement had already been receiving death threats for years. A female leader had publicly said she'd received a phone call, someone telling her that orders had been issued to kill her, Atilano, and 2 other leaders. Nobody knew exactly who was behind the threat, and the violence wasn't theoretical. According to Atilano himself, captured in a documentary made after his death, About 40 members of his movement had been killed over a 5-year span. He said it plainly.
It was government intimidation, a way to make them stop fighting.
By the time Atilano sat down at his microphone that Saturday morning, he was already the third activist from his movement to be in just 5 months. Then came that Saturday. Around 10:40 in the morning, Atilano was on air, broadcasting from the building that also housed the El Sol de Mazatlan newspaper. He had colleagues in the room with him. Just a regular show, just another Saturday. Surveillance footage later showed that 2 men had followed Atilano by car, from his house, through the streets of Mazatlan, all the way to the station. They walked inside, asked the receptionist for Atilano by name. She told them to wait, and she'd let him know. They didn't wait. They shoved the door open and forced their way into the studio.
2 assailants reportedly entered the studio and shot him at least 3 times. The gunshots were broadcast live on air.
One of the men struck an employee with the butt of a pistol. The other walked straight up to Atilano and shot him in the head and in the chest with a 9mm handgun. All of it broadcast live.
The assailants fled after the attack. Roman was seriously injured and died later in hospital.
Listeners at home heard the gunshot. Then they heard a coworker scream,
"He killed him! He killed him!"
The station operator dove to the floor and ripped out the master cable, cutting the transmission. Fiesta Mexicana went dead silent for half an hour. Atilano was rushed to a nearby hospital. He didn't make it. The gunmen fled immediately. The fact that they didn't turn their weapons on anyone else in the room told investigators everything. This was about silencing one man, one voice, the voice that wouldn't stop fighting for his people. Sinaloa's governor promised justice. The state prosecutor acknowledged they had little to work with. The station had no security cameras, only that surveillance of Atilano being followed beforehand. And as weeks turned into months, as months turned into years, no one was ever charged. A young filmmaker from Sinaloa named Betsabe Garcia, who had known Atilano personally, later made a short documentary called Unsilenced, picked up by the New York Times Op-Doc series. She said something that cuts to the heart of this story. When audio from the murder was retransmitted across the country by hundreds of media outlets, that's the cruel irony. The very medium Atilano used to fight for his people became the weapon used to terrorize them. His murder brought the total number of journalists and communicators killed in Mexico since 2000 to 80. And the day before Atilano was killed, another Sinaloan journalist, Jesus Antonio Gamboa Urias, disappeared. His body was found 13 days later. But here's the thing about silencing someone on live radio. The whole world heard it, and that means the whole world knows his name. Atilano Roman Tirado, a man who refused to stop talking until someone made sure he couldn't, and no one has ever answered for it. August 7th, 2015, a radio studio in northeastern Brazil. A journalist is live on air, and 2 men walk through the front door claiming they want to buy an ad. They didn't.
A radio presenter in Brazil has been shot dead live on air. Security forces in the town of Camocim have arrested 2 men suspected of fatally shooting Gleidson Carvalho.
Gleidson Carvalho was 36 years old. He'd been working in radio since he was 20, starting out as a DJ on a small community channel. Over the years, he climbed through local stations across the state of Ceará, Rusas, Caririatsu, eventually landing his own show on Radio Liberdade FM in the coastal town of Camocim. And Gleidson wasn't your typical radio host. He didn't just play music and read the weather. He used his microphone like a weapon, aimed directly at corrupt politicians. Day after day, show after show, he called out local officials by name. He exposed shady deals. He held powerful people accountable in a region where doing that could get you killed. And people let him know it. Death threats flooded his Facebook page. His co-workers warned him, but Gleidson kept going. That August afternoon, he was hosting his regular lunchtime program. The show hit a musical intermission, a brief pause between segments. That's when 2 men entered the station. They told the receptionist they were there to place an advertisement. It sounded routine. Nobody thought twice. Then they overpowered the receptionist, pushed past the front area, made their way to Gleidson's recording studio, and once inside, they shot him 5 times. 3 bullets to the head, 2 to the chest. A sound engineer was in the room at the time. He wasn't touched. The killers only wanted Gleidson. They walked out the door. climbed onto a white motorbike with an accomplice waiting outside, and disappeared. Gleitson was rushed to a nearby hospital. He died on the way.
As he was recording his morning radio show for Liberdade FM, Carvalho, who is known for denouncing people on his program, was killed while a musical intermission was playing.
Now here's where the investigation gets interesting. Police pulled security camera footage, not from the day of the shooting, but from 3 days before, August 4th. It showed two men loitering outside the radio station, scoping the place out. They were identified as Tiago Lemos da Silva, 22, and Israel Marquez Carnero, 31. This wasn't some impulsive act. They'd been planning it. Within 24 hours, police arrested a young couple, Francisco Portela and Giselle do Nascimento, who had sheltered the gunman after the shooting. They'd been paid 9,000 reais for their silence. Matching clothes and weapons were found at their home. A third person was detained, Daniel Lenin Almada da Silva, because the getaway motorcycle was registered in his name. And here's where it gets darker. Lenin was the cousin of Camosim's mayor, James Bell, the same James Bell that Gleitson Carvalho had spent years publicly accusing of corruption on his radio show. In September, Tiago Lemos was caught. He admitted to being part of the murder, but denied pulling the trigger. His wife was also arrested for helping plan it. By December, police had tracked the money. Francisco Pereira da Silva, uncle of both the shooter and the mayor, was arrested on suspicion of financing the hit. And his brother, João Batista Pereira da Silva, also the mayor's uncle, was identified as the mastermind behind the whole thing. But he vanished. As of the last public reporting, both he and Israel Marquez Carnero were still listed as fugitives. April 2019, a Brazilian court handed down sentences. Lemos got 27 years. Nascimento and Lemos's wife each received 23. But the man who allegedly ordered the killing? Still free. And the mayor? He denied any knowledge. He was never charged. Gleitson Carvalho was the fourth journalist murdered in Brazil that year alone. In the 5 months before his death, a radio journalist was shot dead near the Paraguayan border. A blogger was found decapitated in Minas Gerais, and another radio host was kidnapped, tortured, and dumped in Bahia. All of them reported on corruption. None of those cases were resolved either. The Committee to Protect Journalists documented at least 16 journalists killed in Brazil between 2011 and 2015 in direct retaliation for their work. But for the people of Camachim, it was simpler than that. They lost the one voice that wasn't afraid to speak up. And the people who silenced him, some went to prison. Ones who mattered most never answered for it. November 5th, 2023. Just past 5 in the morning, Juan Chumalon, better known to his listeners as DJ Johnny Walker, is doing what he always does, spinning tracks, cracking jokes, spreading good vibes on 94.7 Gold Mega Calamba FM in Calamba, Misamis Occidental. His show streams live on Facebook. About 2,400 followers tune in regularly. This morning, they're about to witness something no one should ever see. Two men walk up to the gate of his home, which also serves as his radio station. They're wearing caps pulled low. They tell the staff they need to make a public announcement about some lost belongings. It sounds harmless. The staff lets them in. That's when everything changes. One of the men pulls out a .45 caliber pistol and points it at the staffer. The other walks straight into the radio booth, where Johnny Walker is live on air.
Police say 57-year-old Juan Chumalon was live streaming his home-based station on the southern island of Mindanao. Officers say an unidentified gunman entered the booth and fatally shot him. On the live stream, viewers see Jumalon pause. He glances up away from the camera at something off screen. Then 2 gunshots ring out. He slumps back in his chair. Blood begins to pour from his mouth, and the cheerful background music just keeps playing.
When an unidentified gunman entered the studio, shot Mr. Chumalon at close range, and then fled the scene after stealing Mr. Chumalon's necklace.
A third accomplice was waiting outside on a motorcycle, acting as lookout. They disappeared into the early morning. His family rushed him to the hospital. He was pronounced dead on arrival. The original live stream was deleted within hours, but it was too late. Netizens had already recorded it. The footage spread across the country. Here's what makes this case so disturbing. Johnny Walker wasn't some hard-hitting investigative journalist exposing cartels or corruption. His show was about good vibes, neighborhood chatter, relationship advice, lively instrumentals and jokes. He wasn't known for criticizing anyone on air. The 57-year-old broadcaster built his entire reputation on feel-good radio. His widow, Jerabel, believes the motive was personal. She told investigators that just days before the killing, her husband had won a court case involving a land dispute, the very land where his radio station sat. Police confirmed Jumalan had a heated argument with two individuals over that land just 48 hours before his death. The killing sparked national outrage. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. took to social media within hours with strong words and stronger promises.
On journalists will not be tolerated in our democracy, and those who threaten the freedom of the press will face the full consequences of their actions.
But for press freedom groups, those words rang hollow. Because Johnny Walker wasn't an isolated tragedy, he was a statistic.
The killing of Juan Humalon is the fourth killing of a journalist since the President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. took over in June 2022.
Jumalan became the 199th journalist killed in the Philippines since 1986, the fourth under the Marcos Jr. administration alone. The Committee to Protect Journalists ranks the country 8th worst in the world on its impunity index, meaning journalists get killed and their killers walk free. Sean Crispin of CPJ put it bluntly,
"Talk isn't action, and until something changes, broadcasters like Juan will keep dying."
In this year's index, the Philippines was found to be the 8th worst country in the world when it comes to prosecuting the killers of journalists. So that gives you a sense of just how difficult an environment it is to be a journalist in the Philippines.
Johnny Walker went on air that Sunday morning to make people smile. Instead, his final broadcast became evidence, streamed live to the world. A chilling reminder that in some places, even playing music and telling jokes into a microphone can cost you your life. February 14th, 2017, Valentine's Day. Luis Manuel Medina is sitting behind his microphone, doing what he's done for 25 years, reading the news live on air. His show, Milenio Caliente, is streaming on Facebook Live. Thousands of followers are watching, and then everything changes.
Journalists shot dead during Facebook Live broadcast. 2 radio journalists were gunned down in the Dominican Republic on Tuesday morning during a news broadcast on Facebook Live.
Medina was a fixture in San Pedro de Macorís, a small city about 45 miles east of Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. He hosted the morning show on FM 103.5, a station tucked inside a shopping mall. Nothing about it screamed danger. Beyond the radio, he was the official announcer for the Estrellas Orientales baseball team. People knew him. People trusted him. His co-producer, Leonidas Martinez, ran the show from behind the scenes, booking guests, directing the broadcast, keeping everything moving. In the weeks leading up to that day, Medina had been vocal about pollution in Laguna Malin, a protected lake in San Pedro. He wasn't afraid to call things out. That was his nature. But the man who walked into the station that morning wasn't there because of the lake. Jose Rodriguez was 59 years old. He'd been locked in a bitter dispute with the State Sugar Council over land he'd purchased from them. He wanted his money back. He'd actually shown up at the station before, at least twice. Once when the director of the Sugar Council was being interviewed on air. February 14th, he came back, this time carrying a folder of documents and a gun. Rodriguez went to Martinez's office first, shot him dead before Martinez even had a chance to react. Then he moved toward the recording studio. Meanwhile, Medina was still on air, still streaming, still live. What the Facebook Live audience heard next was something no one was prepared for.
En diversas manifestaciones políticas. En el caso de Parks y Bones, ambos organizaron al menos una cena de gala. Tiro, tiro, tiro.
3 men were arrested in connection with the shootings, but none have been charged as police say they do not yet have a motive.
The station secretary, Diana Garcia de Fernandez, was also shot, hit in the stomach. She survived after emergency surgery, but barely. Rodriguez then entered the recording studio and Medina, 2 men dead, a woman fighting for her life. All of it captured on a live stream that followers could do absolutely nothing about but watch. The Facebook Live video stayed up on Medina's page. Comments flooded in, grief, disbelief. His page was full of similar live streams from previous broadcasts, short clips from his weekday shows.
The attackers burst into the office of radio station FM 103.5, which is located inside a shopping mall in San Pedro de Macorís, 45 miles east of the capital Santo Domingo.
Police moved fast. 3 men were arrested within 24 hours. The primary suspect was confirmed as Jose Rodriguez. But the next day, when officers tried to apprehend him, things went sideways. Police said Rodriguez fired at them multiple times before turning the gun on himself. The National Forensic Institute ruled it one gunshot wound to the head, but anonymous neighbors told reporters a different story. They claimed Rodriguez was killed in a shootout. The truth behind his death remains murky. And the motive? That's where it gets strange. A government commission later investigated and concluded the murders were directly linked to Rodriguez's land dispute with the Sugar Council. But here's the thing, Medina and Martinez had nothing to do with those deals. They weren't investigating Rodriguez. They weren't reporting on his land dispute. The report called it an indecipherable enigma. The best anyone could piece together was that Rodriguez came carrying documents, looking for answers, and when he couldn't get them from 2 men who had no power to help him, he snapped. He opened fire on 3 innocent people doing their jobs. Olivo de Leon, from the Dominican College of Journalism, said the attack was unprecedented in the country's history. He warned that if impunity followed, it would generate fear among every journalist in the country. It would make them scared to speak out. UNESCO's Director General condemned the killings. The Attorney General called it a condemnable and painful act that has appalled Dominican society. But condemnation doesn't bring people back, and the whole world watched it happen in real time. Sometimes the danger doesn't come from the story you're telling. Sometimes it just comes through the door. August 10th, 2017. A Swedish journalist boards a homemade submarine in Copenhagen for a quick interview. She never comes back. Kim Wall was 30 years old, a freelance reporter who'd covered stories across the globe: Haiti, Uganda, Sri Lanka, North Korea. She wasn't chasing danger. She was chasing a story about a quirky Danish inventor who built rockets and submarines in his spare time. His name was Peter Madsen, and on paper, he seemed harmless. Madsen had invited Wall aboard his submarine, the UC-3 Nautilus, for a 2-hour interview. She told her boyfriend she'd be back in time for their farewell party. They were about to move to Beijing together. She boarded around 7 p.m. By 1:43 a.m., her boyfriend was calling police. Kim was missing. The next morning, the submarine was spotted in Koga Bay. It was sinking, and Madsen was the only one on board. A documentary filmmaker named Emma Sullivan had actually been following Madsen for over a year before any of this happened. She was making a film about his eccentric quest to launch a homemade rocket into space. She had no idea what her footage would become.
What followed was one of the most tumultuous, difficult days I've ever lived through, and it ended with a Swedish female journalist missing and Peter Madsen arrested for her murder.
Sullivan had spent months documenting Madsen. She'd seen a side of him the public loved, the brilliant, self-taught inventor, a semi-celebrity in Denmark. But what she captured on camera would take on an entirely different meaning after Kim Wall disappeared.
The unimaginable happened, and I was awoken one morning to my phone running off the hook that a submarine was missing in Copenhagen. And of course that was Peter Madsen's submarine.
Madsen's story kept changing. First, he claimed he dropped Wall off on land. Then he said she died accidentally, hit by the submarine's hatch cover. Then he changed it again, saying exhaust fumes might have killed her. Every single version was contradicted by the evidence.
The rescue vehicle only has Peter, and apparently the journalist was put on shore sometimes last evening, but the boyfriend and her family haven't heard from her.
August 21st, a cyclist found Wall's torso washed up on a beach. Metal had been attached to it, an attempt to keep it from floating. A post-mortem revealed 15 stab wounds. Over the following months, police divers recovered her head, her legs, her arms, all in separate locations throughout Koga Bay. A knife, a saw, and the footage Sullivan had captured, it became chilling in hindsight.
Then I realized he was only a few hours from where I was, so I contacted him. He wrote back to me almost immediately with a pretty profound message in the space of a few hours.
That's the thing about Madsen. He was disarming, charming even. He made people trust him. Kim Wall trusted him enough to step onto that submarine alone.
The thing with interacting with Peter Madsen is that he's always seemingly innocuous. Here is a very rather singular behaving man. Yes, he wasn't your average type.
Sullivan went back through every frame of footage she'd shot over the previous year. What had once been simple B-roll now carried a weight she never could have anticipated.
You're gonna die anyway. It's only a matter of how much pain. Your life will end in downfall, no matter what you do.
Yeah. That footage, originally just material for a documentary about rockets, became critical evidence in one of Denmark's most high-profile murder trials. In a case with limited hard physical evidence, what Sullivan and the people around Madsen had captured on camera helped build the prosecution's case.
Mainly just circumstantial evidence. These people were actually instrumental in getting a conviction.
March 8th, 2018, Madsen's trial began at Copenhagen Courthouse. He was charged with murder, assault, and indecent handling of a corpse. April 25th, he was found guilty on all counts. Life imprisonment. He appealed. The higher court upheld every bit of it. But Madsen wasn't done making headlines. In October 2020, he threatened a prison psychologist with a fake pistol and what looked like an explosive belt, then fled in a hijacked van.
He initially made his escape by threatening a prison employee and then jumped into a van and forced the driver to go through the prison gates. This was the moment that police caught up with him.
He made it 500 meters before police surrounded him in a field. The bomb squad was called in. They sent a robot to assess the threat. The gun was fake. The bomb was fake. But the kind of person he was, that was very, very real. Questions swirled about how a life prisoner convicted of murder could get access to materials to craft realistic-looking weapons. But none of it changed the outcome. Madsen was returned to his cell, and the locks around him only tightened. Kim Wall's family founded the Kim Wall Memorial Fund to support female journalists covering stories of cultural value. Her parents published a book in her memory, A Silenced Voice, because that's exactly what Madsen tried to do, silence her. Kim Wall walked onto that submarine to tell someone else's story. She never got to tell her own, but the people around her, the filmmaker, the investigators, her family, they made sure her voice wasn't lost. And they made sure Peter Madsen would never hurt anyone again.